Hey, it's Matt Pinfield. Welcome to In a Lonely Place. And remember, you're never in a lonely place. If you got music in your life, certainly got me through this part of the pandemic. We're still in it, but hey, we've been making it the best out of it by doing this great show. And of course, I named it after a movie from Humphrey Bogart from 1950, as well as songs by the Smithereens and New Order. And it just seemed like the perfect name. And I've been having a great time doing it and inviting friends on to talk about music, their records, and just what's going on in their lives. Very excited to have our guest today. He started a band in Phoenix, Arizona in the early 1990s, and he gave a young 15-year-old singer his first break when he let him join his band. We're talking about Chester Bennington, of course, and it's Sean right now. It's Sean Dowdell from the band Gray Daze. Sean, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you.
Likewise, Matt. Thanks for having me on today. I appreciate it.
You got to tell me all about, the early 90s for you there, being, in Phoenix, Arizona. Obviously, it was such an incredible time for music. Yesterday was the anniversary of 3 albums coming out in one day in 1991. Nirvana's Nevermind, Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and Soundgarden's Bad Motor Finger all on one day, which is just, it was a seismic shift in rock and roll. And then, of course, all the other bands that came along with that, Pearl Jam, Stone Temple Pilots, all those great bands that were all part of that period of time. Talk to me about where you were at, and you were a teenage kid at that point, weren't you?
Yeah, so when I got into the music industry in 1992, we formed our first band. All those bands that you just named off were pretty much defining the music scene direction at the time. And, this whole grunge kind of rock vibe was happening back then. And I think I was 17, 18 years old at the time. 17 when we first started playing drums. And then as we formed our first band, those bands were hugely impressional, made a huge impression for all of us. And we wanted to emulate them. And that Chili Peppers record you just named off is in my top albums that you guys were asking me about. It really defined a moment in history for us. And I love the fact I just learned about the title of the show, In a Lonely Place, where that came from. I didn't know that. So that's really cool. And to hear your little byline that you're never lonely if you have music, man, as a teenager, you're absolutely right. That is one of the things that kept me from doing some really stupid things and making really bad decisions was music. And for me, the bands that I idolized and loved, the songs that I love, I can timestamp those to an exact moment in my life where they remind me at, what emotions I was feeling. And as we started to play in a rock band, I just loved the whole grunge rock vibe. And we really just kind of wanted to emulate that when we started out. Of course, it progressed and became something much more than that. But in the beginning, that's what it was all about, was trying to be like our idols.
Yeah, it's amazing because, as you started the band, let me ask you a question. With Gray Daze, at first, was there a band that were you guys working already when you auditioned to 15-year-old Chester Bennington?
No, we were just as green as he was. And it's funny that on the intro when you said, when you let him join our band, that sounds so funny to me hearing that out loud because he's clearly the most talented guy in the room,
Yeah, one of the greatest.
Looking back, I took on much more of a big brother role with him early on. And then, of course, that developed into a budding friendship that lasted many years. But he really had something innate at an early age. And the moment he came in and auditioned for the band, we knew within 3 lines of him singing, he auditioned to a Pearl Jam Alive is what he sang in the audition. And we knew the moment he started singing, this is the guy we want to play with.
That's amazing.
He just had that magic, he had that glow.
So talk to me about that day when he came in to audition for you guys and to sing. And you took on that big brother role. Did you guys start hanging out like right away? And
it took a few weeks, back then I was still very guarded and I had a really, large ego and we, he was 2 years younger than us. So we just looked at him like he didn't have the experience and he was idolizing us. So it took a while for that relationship to kind of become understood. But he was introduced to us through a mutual friend named Chris Hewlett, who said he knew this kid who sounded just like Eddie Vedder. You got to try him out. We said, yeah, sure, bring him down. We'll give him a try. And of course, he showed up and he walks in. He's 90 pounds. He's got this tight curly hair. He's got glasses. And I remember, and I'm going to tell this story so that I can make fun of myself and kind of hold myself accountable. I remember when he walked in the door, I was so disappointed going, this is not a rock star. Like, what's going on? And then, of course, within 5 minutes, he got up and he sang, and my jaw was on the ground. I'm like, wow, he's great. And I tell that story for a couple of reasons, but the biggest one is to just remind myself not to judge people by the way they look, because I remember feeling like such a dick after that moment, after he sang. I remember thinking, why am I judging him like this? Like, he is who he is, but he's got this talent. And of course we hit it off and things developed from there. But he had this mighty voice in such a small body. And it's kind of hard to describe, but it just hit us in the chest from the moment he started singing.
I think it's amazing. And so what was the next step when it came to writing original material? Because the first album, of course, came out in 94, the record that you put out, right?
Well, we put out a demo and did a few recordings before the full-length album. But initially, the first 6 months, we were just learning cover songs because none of us were great songwriters at the time. We were all teenagers. And in order to play with each other, we had to play something that was familiar. So, this was before you had iTunes and you could just look up a song on your phone, and we didn't have phones. And, we had to bring in CDs and try to rewind it and listen to the songs and break down lyrics. And so that's really how we kind of honed our chops, was learning and emulating the people we idolized. And then within 6 months, we started writing our own material, and we became quite good at it. And Chester and I started writing lyrics together. And one of the things that was so great about working with him is, as I got older and I started playing with many different bands and have many different experiences, you come across other singers that their egos are so out of control and they won't take constructive criticism. They don't want to take other people's opinions or perspectives into account when writing. And he was completely the opposite of that. He was very inviting all the way up until the time he passed, Matt. He was very open to working with other people's ideas. And it's just one of the many things that made him such a special person to work with.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be amazing. I'd love to know, what was in that set list when you guys were covering them as teenagers?
All right, well, you're going to laugh, but you got to keep in mind, this is 1992. We did Hellraiser by Motorhead. We did Pearl Jam Alive. We did Smells Like Teen Spirit from Nirvana. I think we did a Kiss song.
Do you know
what's that?
Like Rock and Roll All Night or Strutter or something like that? Or
I think we did a couple. I think we did Rock and Roll All Night, and I think we did Heaven's on Fire, which is kind of funny looking back. And we probably, I'm just thinking outside the box here. I know we did a Jane's Addiction song, Been Caught Stealing, because that was like Chester's favorite band at the time. And then when Stone Temple came out, we did a couple Stone Temple covers as well. But it was all pretty much relevant to the time of, we did a Colt song that he sang so good called Here Comes the Rain. I remember that really well. He sang that so great. Eventually we ended up doing a cover of Dramarama's Anything, Anything that we still have. That'll be coming out on the next album that I swear to God, he sings it better than the original. It is amazing.
That's great. I love that record, and Dramarama. So I can't wait to hear Chester's version of it. I'm sure that John Easdale, who wrote the song and originally performed it, will be so flattered about that because, you know what I mean?
I have a great story about John. We played with Dramarama in Arizona. We opened up for him. And at the time, our version of Anything, Anything was on the radio. And his manager came up to us before we went out, and we were playing a sold-out show. And he said, hey, guys, we really would like you to not play Anything, Anything. And we're like, that's the song on the radio. That's why you guys asked us to open up for you. And we ended up playing it anyways. And John,
you both played it. So people got a double shot that night, right?
Yeah. It was, we were playing it because we liked the song, we liked the band. It wasn't, trying to be insulting by any means. But I remember John came up to Chester right after we got off stage and he said, "Hey, you did a really good job of that." So
yeah,
John did get to hear Chester's version of that live. So that was pretty cool.
Now, so when you say you were on the radio at that time, did that mean that the local alternative or rock station was playing your demos or your? Tell me about that.
Yeah, so in '97 we released our second album, No Sun Today. We started getting a lot of regional love. We were playing sold out shows every time we played at that point. At that point, 97, 98, we had signed 3 different record deals. The last record deal that we signed was a really bad one. We worked on the record for an entire year. The day we went to listen to the mixes, we were told the label got dropped from the distributorship of Interscope, and it was a big mess, and we didn't get the masters, and it was just really deflating to the band. But we went and we recorded our own record right after that called No Sun Today.
The second album, yeah.
The second album. Well, technically our third album, but the second one that was released. And we had 2 songs that actually hit the charts in the region. B12 was one of them, and then our cover of Dramarama's Anything, Anything was the second one.
Right, and B12, of course, was kind of reconstructed for Immense. Now that's a great story. You got to tell me about that because what that was like. Because I know at your peak there, I mean, having a following where you're drawing 1,000 to 2,000 people a night is great. If you're a local band, and I think one of the things that is a shame about the consolidation of radio right now is that when stations aren't supporting local acts in their area, it's criminal. And I'm a guy who comes from radio who, in Asbury Park, New Jersey, on the Jersey Shore, supported area bands in a big way and put them in rotation with the big bands of the day. And then the perception was that these bands were also big and important. It was a great way to kickstart their career. And I love the fact that you had that there. Tell me about that. What station was that was giving you the support?
There was 2 stations in particular. KUPD was a big one, and then The Edge back in the 90s. There were 2 specific DJs back then. Greg Paul, who was the first guy to play Great A's in Chester on the radio at KEDJ at the time, and then Larry Mack, who was on KUPD and then KUKQ. Those 2 guys really supported the local music scene.
Yeah, KUKQ, remember, was the AM alternative station.
Yeah. Well, and then he.
Dowdell, I remember him. I actually went to I went to their festival, like back in the day.
Yeah.
And there, they brought me out, and then I also hosted one of the Edge Fests in Phoenix when Kid Rock was there. And I will tell you a really interesting story because that same festival, I think, was the one where Linkin Park played, only had One Step Closer on the radio, no album yet, but actually played early in the day. And it's a funny story where Chester and his dad wanted to get on stage during Incubus's set to end. And I was like, I had talked to Chester and interviewed him earlier in the day. And the security guys were being assholes to Chester and his dad. And I said, hey, wait a minute, let those guys get on stage. And I had my All Access pass since I was hosting the event. I even got up and sang Devil Without a Cause. I did Joe C's parts with Kid Rock that night because Joe C was sick. So I got out there at the racetrack and did that live.
Nice.
And I remember the joke was I said to Chester, I said, you know what? I go, fuck that guy. I go, next year you'll be headlining this fest and you can throw him off the stage. And a year later, they blew up. And I remember I go, what did I tell you? He goes, you got any more predictions? That was fucking spot on. So a year later, I mean, Linkin Park were huge at that period of time. But let's get back to Great A's and talk about that. So you said you had 3 record deals. That's got to be, I know people are watching that are in bands. People have been through so many stops and starts. Even bands like AWOL Nation, where, there's been, Aaron had 3 different record deals in 3 different bands. Like Mondo Cosmo, that guy Josh who's in that band, was signed 3 different times in different. What were those different labels that you guys were on, those stops and starts back in the day?
We had a deal with Sony. We had a deal with the bad deal that I mentioned before with Real Records.
Yeah.
Real Records was a subsidiary of Interscope. And then we had a deal with Warner Brothers, was the last deal we signed, which was a production deal. And then we ended up breaking up right in the middle of that production deal.
Yeah. It's amazing how those things happen. But I'm so glad that it's seen the light of day. Was it exciting seeing how there was such a proactive audience of people for Great A's there in Phoenix? Because Phoenix loved rock and roll and loved alternative music. There was no question about it.
at the time, the scene in Phoenix was going off. You had bands like the Refreshments who ended up blowing up. You had the Gin Blossoms, which were a little before our time. But then you had the Refreshments, you had the Funk Junkies. So you had some bands that were starting to really bubble and do some stuff nationally. And I think that's one of the reasons the scene at the time was getting some attention. We had some adamantly just really hardcore fans. And I remember there's a videotape out there floating around of where we opened up for Seven Mary 3, and we outdrew them by far. It was sold out. And there's a videotape of them in a booth across from us after the show where we have like hundreds of kids waiting to get autographs. And they're standing there scratching their head going, who the fuck are these guys, man? Just they didn't understand what was going on. You know, we're just some local band to them. They didn't never hear of us. So we really had strong local support, regional support. You know, we'd go out and headline the Whiskey. We'd play some of the better clubs regionally and do really well. And I think it goes to the core is, for one, the band was a really good performing band, but two, we had really good songs. You know, Chester's voice is no joke. It's no accident that he ended up going on to mega stardom with Linkin Park because he's so freaking good.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're celebrating their 20th anniversary of Hybrid Theory, you know, this box set they have coming out. But I love the fact that you guys decided to do this project. Tell me, did you go and say, you know, this is something that I want to do? How did this project end up starting? I know that Talinda, obviously, Chester's widow, had some involvement in it, but, you know, you ended up working with two of my best friends who were involved in the project. Jade Baumgartner, great producer, studio owner of NRG, and Renee Mata, who's also, like I said, those guys are two of my best friends. And Renee's an incredible connector, was close with Chester as well. And, you know, there's this long-term relationship there. How did the project get off the ground?
So in 2016, when Chester was still alive, so Chester and I were business partners as well. After Grey Daze broke up, he went on to Linkin Park. In 2003, we became business partners in a company called Club Tattoo, which is a luxury tattoo and piercing studios. We have stores in Vegas. We have stores in Arizona. And it's really, really successful. So Chester and I have several businesses together. And through the 2000s, we had toyed with putting Grey Daze back together several times. Once in 2002, once in 2007, and then in 2016, we were on a phone call just discussing a bunch of stuff. We were going to throw another Club Tattoo anniversary party. We used to throw these big parties for our company. And every time we would throw one of them, Chester and I would get up on stage with our friends and we'd play a set. And it would literally 4,000 or 5,000 people would be there. It would be a very big event. And we talked about doing another one of those events. And he says, you know, I've been thinking about that. And for the next Club Tattoo party, I think it's time we put Grey Daze back together. And I said, all right, that actually sounds like a lot of fun, as we have been toying with it for so long. And I played a little side stuff with him. So we just decided to do that. Once we started talking to our respective camps and making that kind of come to fruition and putting a target date, I believe the first target date was in July, and then we ended up moving it to September. We started getting offers around the world to start playing shows. Hey, Grey Daze, get back together. We want, you know, Japan, Australia. And he calls me. We have several more conversations. We start laughing like, who'd have thought this would actually become something? He's like, well, if we're going to do this, we should record something so we have something for people to buy. And through those conversations, we're like, well, we have like 25, 28 songs already recorded that are good songs. So let's go through them, pick the best ones and re-record them and get them up to speed so we can release it and see what happens. That's how it started. In January of 2017, we started working with a producer named Sylvia Massey and started reconstructing the songs.
Right.
We would email them to Chester because he was on the road doing some Linkin Park stuff for the One More Light tour. And we would get on the phone. He'd say, yeah, I want to change this. Let's do different guitars here, different, you know, and doing it that way. And through those subsequent conversations, we're like, you know what? We really kind of need to modernize this a little bit. Let's add some programming. Let's add some synthesizer stuff in here so that we can make the music sound a little bit more modern and not like we're just polishing some 90s songs. We didn't want them to sound like they were from the 90s. We wanted them to sound new, fresh, and relevant. That's how it all started. So once Chester passed, we were in the middle of that process, and we didn't have a chance for him to go back and re-record vocals. So it just sat, after Chester's funeral, it probably took 5 or 6 months before I finally woke up one day and I just turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to finish the record. And she said, well, how? And I said, I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I got to figure it out. So several weeks went by and we started thinking about just finishing the songs the way they were. And then I get a phone call from Renee, who I did not know, but I had known of him through Chester. Chester would tell me about his friend Renee. Oh, you and Renee get along so good. It's my boy from New York. Let's go hang. And we just never connected. And then Renee actually called me one day and we just had a really long conversation and shared a lot of stories. And he really kind of laid out a path for this. He's like, hey, man, if we're going to do this, here's what I think you guys should do. And we kind of talked through that. He said, let's work with Jay. He's a good producer. Let's go out to NRG and lay these tracks down right. Let's bring the music up to a standard that Chester's fans need to hear it at. And that's what we did. So I went out to LA. We flew Renee out there, met with Jay, and started working on it. And it took us about 2 years to complete.
I love it. I mean, it's amazing with Immense, the fact that you had taken those and you kind of like reverse produced working on the record, right? And it was one of those things where you took the vocals and they kind of built everything back up around it with your playing and the incredible guests that you guys brought in as well. I mean, and it must have been fun for you too, because these are guys that were making records that you definitely were enjoyed and admired as well. So to have, play with different people on it, like the Page Hamiltons of the world and Monkey and Head. Talk to me about the next steps. Now, I know there are 22 songs and 11 have been released right now. And there's enough for an entire next record, right? It's going to come.
Yeah, and maybe some more. We've got some other stuff up our sleeve, but we are definitely going to do at least one more record. That's on the table right now.
Yeah.
So the next step is we're currently writing for the next record. And, you'd mentioned on the process of how we put these songs together. Basically, when we decided to redo the record, we said, you know what, let's start with the whole reason we're doing this. And this is all about Chester. Let's strip the music away from Chester and just listen to his vocals. And we isolated his those vocal tracks on every single song and worked on the arrangement, worked on his pitch, and just made sure that they were perfect. And then we said, this is our starting point. This is our foundation. We literally wrote the music up and around his vocals and made sure that every single song was based on and written around that vocal performance. We wanted to make sure that we captured the essence and the integrity of the emotions he was trying to convey in each song. And that's literally the approach we took with every song, and that's what we're doing on the next record as well. That's
amazing. So let's talk about the different sessions that took place. Tell me about working with Page Hamilton from Hellman.
Page showed up one night. I didn't know who he was. Of course, I know the name, but I didn't know him, and I didn't know what he looked like. And Jay came in to the studio and said, "Hey, this is Page." And I said, "Hey, Page, how you doing? We're just hanging out." And Renee, I think, hopped on the phone the next day and said, "Hey, Page would like to contribute and play on Sickness." And we said, "Okay, cool." And literally, I think Jay had sent the tracks to him without even us knowing about it. And he had already laid down this idea and we sent it back. We're like, it's fucking great. So that's really how we ended up working with Page, was kind of through Renee and Jay. It was obviously Renee had Page had a relationship with Chester. And that was the key to getting anybody to work on this, was what was the relationship with Chester? Did they know him personally? Did they love his work? Did Chester admire their work? And that's really how we kind of viewed the criteria. We had other people that wanted to play on the record, and there was no connection to Chester with it. It was just more, hey, this guy's famous, he wants to play on the record. That's not what this is about. So we really kind of kept it to the few people that we ended up choosing to help work on the record. And I think we did it for the right reasons. Working with Head and Monkey was great. Jason Rock from Breaking Benjamin was great. LP. Chester didn't know LP, but he loved her music. And I remember a very specific conversation about him. Chester, and how animated he was. He was just
when he loved something, he was definitely very, very animated. He you know what I mean? He had that expressive side in him that I love. That's why we all love him, right?
He was always the wiry guy in the room. He always had his hands moving and watch out if he was driving a car trying to tell a story, because there was a 50% chance you were going to get in a car accident. But I remember one specific conversation where he was having me listen to a song by this artist named LP. And of course, every time he and I were together, he'd talk about LP, my mind went to Linkin Park. I'm like, I am not putting two and two together. I finally realized this was her name, LP. And he played a song called Lost on You. This was back in 2016. And he said, this girl is so good, man. Check her out. And I was floored by her vocal ability. So that's how we got connected with her. And, anybody that we had involved in the project had to show some love for Chester. That's really what it was about.
What were some of those conversations like when you were recording that night with Monkey and Head? Were they telling any old stories with you while they were doing it? What were they talking about?
Those dudes. First of all, I've known Brian, and I've known Brian more than I know Monkey. But I've known Monkey and Brian since back in 2003 when I went out on the road with Chester when they were 2002, 2003 when they were out on the road with Korn, and they've always treated me very respectfully, very nice. We've tattooed Brian a bunch of times in our tattoo shop. And I had lost touch with him over the years. And then I ran into Brian and Monkey at the Hollywood Bowl tribute show that was for Chester. And he came up, he just gave me a big hug, and we exchanged numbers again. And then we were on the phone several months after that, of course. And I was telling him about us trying to revive this project and finish it. And I said, would you listen to a song and give me your honest opinion? And I sent him B12. And I swear to God, 3 minutes and 40 seconds later, my phone rings. And he's like, dude, this is fucking amazing, man. What is this? And so I had to walk him through the whole thing. And I said, Chester always really loved you, Brian. Would you want to play on this song? And he says, I'd be honored. And then he called me back the next day. He says, is it okay if Monkey plays too? Monkey wants to do this. And he loves the track. And I said, are you kidding me? Chester loved you guys. He absolutely loved those guys. And that's why we had them play. And then when they showed up, they were so professional. They had both done their homework. They had both listened to the song 100 times. They had both written parts for it. They showed up ready to make that track as great as it ended up coming out. They were not only great guitar players, but they showed up ready to work and pay homage to their friend in the right way. And they were so respectful. And Monkey shared such a great story after we recorded. It was weeks later. And I don't know if we were on a phone call or a text message. It might have even been a text message thread. And he just told me that he was in a show in Australia. I believe it was U2. And he was struggling with his sobriety. And Chester came up to him and he says it was like an angel out of nowhere. He talked to him about his sobriety. He was really struggling. And Chester just showed up at the right moment and talked him out of a tree. And he was very grateful for that moment of seeing Chester at that spot because he felt like he wasn't going to make it through that night. And I just thought that was a really cool story. And those guys are just so honorable people.
Absolutely. That was the thing about Chester. He would call me when I was going through my struggles as well and leave messages and get me on the phone and tell me, it was major. It gave me major support. And, I actually still have a couple of those messages on my voicemail. I don't know. I haven't listened to them because it's too painful, but I've also haven't erased them. You know what I mean? But he was there.
I listen to his voicemails all the time. I have a bunch of them. I did the same thing.
Yeah, I saved them. Last call he made me was a few days before we lost him. And also, again, just checking in to make sure that I was feeling right, that I was continuing to stay in sobriety and recovery. So I love them, and I just want to say that. I would tell you that story. Now I gotta talk to you too about Chris Traynor playing on the record. from Bush, because Chris is such a great player. Tell me how that ended up happening.
So I did not know Chris before that. He was introduced to us through Renee and Kyle Hoffman, the engineer.
Yeah.
And originally we brought him in to play on Soul Song, and we hit it off so well. We ended up having Chris play on 4 tracks. He plays on Just Like Heroin. He plays on Soul Song. He plays on What's in the Eye, and he plays on Sometimes.
Yeah.
Not only is a great guitar player, but just a really good dude, man. He had some great advice for us. He had great songwriting contributions with us with the way we reapproach these tracks. And he was great to work with and really helped us through the process. He was kind of that pseudo 5th member of the project at that point.
Yeah.
And he and I just talked to him this morning. He and I have become close friends through the process.
Sometimes is my favorite song on the record. I mean, I like a lot of them, but I love Sometimes.
Awesome. Tell our label to release it as the next single.
It's got to be. It's such a great song, man. It just kills me. I love it every time I listen to it. I listened to it as you guys were working on it, as it was a work in progress.
Oh, okay.
Baumgartner, we'd listen to it in his car and drive around, and man, I love that song. It's such great work of Chester's there. Tell me about working with Chester's son, Jamie, too, on the record.
So about halfway through the project, I was sitting in the studio and just something kind of hit me like a lightning bolt in the chest. You know what? Chester never got to record anything with his children, ever. That's something that we can give back to him. How fucking cool is it that we get to give Chester something back during this process? And then the idea just like, I was obsessed with it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to reach out to all the kids and see if they want to sing with their dad. And so I did. I reached out to every kid, Draven, Jamie, Lila, Lily, Tyler, and for Talinda's credit, she thought that Lila, Lily, and Tyler were a little too young to make that choice, and I totally respected that and understood it. And then Draven at first was really interested, and then I think he kind of just became a little apprehensive. He didn't quite know how to take it. It was all so much so fast, and I totally respect that.
Yeah, he's a great kid too. He's a great young guy.
Yeah, he's a good kid. He really is. Great young man at this point.
Great young man. You're right, man. They grow fast. I think about it. It was last time I was in the studio with him and his family, and I was just wow. It's been a few years now, so it's pretty amazing. So tell me, so Jamie agreed to do it and was interested in working.
Yeah. So as soon as I called Jamie, he said, absolutely. This is a once in a lifetime thing. I never got to play with my dad. I'd love to. And we gave him a choice of 2 tracks. One was The Syndrome and one was Soul Song, and he chose Soul Song. And I think that was the right one to choose, by the way. Looking back at it, it's just got a lot more spiritual insight and thoughtfulness and meaning behind it. I think it's a much deeper intellectual, spiritual track lyrically. So he gets to sing with his father, and he came in, he knocked it out in a couple takes, did a great job, sings backing vocals on the chorus. And I hope to get the children that didn't do this record to come in and sing on the next record. And for me, it's only about letting Chester get to do that with his kids, because he never got to do that. And that's something that we can give back. And we felt his presence the entire time in that studio. We had a little portrait of him on the mixing console. We kept it with us, and we could feel his energy throughout the entire process.
Yeah, it's amazing. And it came out great, and I can't wait for the next one. I want to talk to you about your favorite albums. We do a thing here on In a Lonely Place, where we ask you to pick 7 of the most important records in your life, because, that's really what it's all about. Music is the thing that gets us through everything. And let's start with the first record that you picked, which is Alice in Chains' Dirt, which, wow, is that one of my favorite records. And so many people love this one. It was certainly the breakthrough for Alice in Chains, after Facelift. There's not a bad track on that record. From Them Bones to Wood, every single track doesn't let up. Tell me why it's important to you, Sean.
For me, that album really timestamps a moment in my life. It's 1992. The grunge scene is just now coming out, and I felt like that, along with Pearl Jam 10 and Nirvana Nevermind, that specific album lyrically, we had a monumental shift in what music was about in a broad sense. You had the 80s, you had cocaine, hookers, partying. Everything was nothing but a good time from Poison, right? Which that is what it is. It was a great moment in time.
Yeah.
The 90s, all of a sudden, it started to become cool to talk about drugs and sadness and melancholy and pain, specifically pain. That moment, that album hit such a raw nerve for me in being able to listen to music and express the pain of a teenager, you know, a young man. I'm not saying I had a super rough life or anything like that. Every kid has their challenges. You have hormones, you're just trying to deal with life as it comes at you. So that specific album, I can just tie it to a very dark place in my life emotionally. And it's one of those things that got me through. And the way Lane Staley approached vocals and the way he and Jerry Cantrell worked together on alternate melodies and the way the lead singer would end up singing the minor part where Jerry would go high and he would go low. It's just such an amazing record. And that's one of the things I think is missing in music today is the album concept, where an album encompasses an entire mood and you can listen to it from the first to last track and it takes you on a specific journey that it's meant to take you on. Nowadays, everything is so single-minded. That I think that is a lost art. It's one of the things that we really tried to do with Amends, and I think we did it. Yeah. But this specific album, when I hear Down in a Hole, or when I hear Rooster, or, you know, Them Bones, like you said, those tracks, they just are incredible. It really is a magical record.
Yeah, I love the record so much. And it was great to be able to work with those guys over the years as I have and become very good friends with them. And be there the night of their Unplugged, which was just incredible with those guys. Last night I saw Lane Staley alive, actually. The next record that you picked is a band that is really from the 80s, a band that my Jersey brothers, Bon Jovi, gave their first break to, Cinderella, and it's Night Songs.
Yeah.
These guys broke through with Nobody's Fool on this record.
That's right.
Talk to me about this and why you love it.
This was an album that was a little pre-grunge, right? Obviously, it was in the late 80s. But once again, I think they completed an entire album of great songs, or at least mostly great songs, and then, you know, a couple of them that are okay. For me, listening to songs like Nothing for Nothing, Somebody Save Me, Back Home Again, Push Push, they really captured that. They weren't just talking about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. You know, it was, for me, that album, the way Tom Kiefer could kind of, the way he sang, you know, was so different back then, and it just captured a good moment in life for me growing up. I would have been in high school during that, and so it just doesn't really do much in the way of my songwriting and the way I approached music in a band sense. But as far as a great album that I have awesome memories of, and I still, when I'm out running, I still listen to some of those Cinderella tracks, even now. So that's one of the reasons I put that on this top 7 albums list. I think Tom Kiefer was a great vocalist, and the way he was a great melody writer.
Absolutely,
otherwise and vocally.
Yeah, you know, and he's continued to work on it as a solo artist and do some stuff over the years, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the next record that you picked was from Depeche Mode, and it's their breakthrough album, Absolutely in America. An incredible album, which, was three or four singles deep, with Policy of Truth, World in My Eyes, and, of course, the legendary Enjoy the Silence, which is such a great track. Violator, big record in your life. Tell me why.
So I'm going to grab a record real quick and show you something real quick.
Okay.
So for us, Chester and me, this was our favorite record. Absolutely favorite record was Depeche Mode Violator. This rose on the back of our Amends album is a homage to Depeche Mode's Violator. This is what this rose means. It's where we got the idea. It's one of the best records, I think, of all time. It's an emotional roller coaster. Once again, you have two singers in Martin Gore and Dave Gahan that work really well together. The incredible melody writers, the great lyricists. believe it or not, they're one of the biggest influences on me as a drummer to not play so straightforward rock. They introduced kind of polyrhythms for me and made me understand that laying down a fat groove while doing some other flavorful things as a drummer was really important. And it's a band I respect the absolute hell out of, and it was Chester's favorite record along with mine. It's an incredible album. Enjoy the Silence is one of my favorite songs off the record. Policy of Truth. Of course, you have World in My Eyes. That's a great track. Personal Jesus. I mean, everything on that record was done. And once again, you have an album from start to finish that you can listen to and go on an emotional journey.
Yeah, it's a great one. Now we're going to shift gears to go back to the end of the 80s with one of the most important, biggest records ever recorded. Great one. Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction, of course. And what a great record.
I don't know how you could be in a rock band from our genre, right? And not love this album.
Yeah.
I love every single track off of this album. Rocket Queen is one of my favorite all-time songs.
Yeah.
Axl just has great vocal performance, great lyrics. I've met Slash many times. We tattooed him in our store, and it's just a great album. I mean, everything. It really, that was one of the turning points for me coming out of the 80s at the glam rock. That was one of the albums that was a turning point for me. It was one of my first concerts I ever went to. Saw them in concert a few times, and it just, it holds that special moment in time for me as well.
Yeah, it's a great record. It still holds up, and it's one of the biggest selling records of all time. Now we're going to shift gears and go over to the UK with this great band, a trio, of course. Tom, the lead singer, by the way, right before the pandemic, they came back and did a show at the Roxy, getting ready to come back around on a tour, kind of a comeback tour for this band, Keane. It's from their debut album, Hopes and Fears, which is such an incredible record with Sometimes Only We Know It. Everybody's changing. There's so many great tracks on here, and his voice is phenomenal. Why do you love this record, Sean?
Chester and I discovered this record together back in the early 2000s. I want to say maybe 2003, 2004. I'm not even sure when the record came out. It'd probably been out for a while at that point. But when we heard it, we listened to it for 2 straight days, over and over and over again. And we couldn't get over the fact that it was a 3-piece band. His melody writing is so phenomenal. He's such a beautiful singer. And tracks, Somewhere Only We Know, Might As Well Be Strangers, Everybody's Changing, Your Eyes Open, She Has No Time is just a beautiful track. My wife and I, it became our favorite record together, as far as, you know how you have your favorite song with your wife or your girlfriend. This became my wife and I's favorite record together. And it sparks a really beautiful moment in time. Maybe it was 2007, 2008. Now I'm thinking about it, that we discovered the record. But in any case, I think it's one of the best records of all times. I love this band. I've seen them in concert. Would love the opportunity. Chester was such a huge fan of this band. Would love the opportunity to collaborate on something with them. Just amazing.
We'd have to reach out to those guys at some point, I could try to
I don't know them.
That'd be great. Now, the next record you picked has major significance, obviously, because it's the song that Chester first performed with you is on this record. It's the massive album and very influential Pearl Jam 10.
So that, to me, was the album that changed everything. We come out of the Guns N' Roses era, and, me listening to Cinderella, and you had Nirvana come out, and I like Nirvana. Great album. Great songs, great energy. You could feel kind of this paradigm shift in music as things happen. But that Pearl Jam 10 album, man, I just connected with it on such a deeply emotional level. It was my freshman year in college when I heard it. And, Even Flow and Alive, and Jeremy, and all those songs just had such great lyrical depth. And for me, I don't know the guys in Pearl Jam, but I felt like, and I don't know a lot even about the band other than this first record. It's just something that I connected with on such a deep level for all those tracks from start to finish. that it felt like every band member was contributing to each specific song in the right way for the right reason. And that's why every track was great. And I felt like after that album, things kind of changed for them. I don't know if Eddie started writing all the music or if Stone started writing the music. And I think the original drummer left, but something changed in the band. Still a good band, but that album was something incredibly special. And it's one of those moments in time that it's really, really difficult to repeat.
Absolutely. No question about it. And I can only imagine just thinking about that moment where Chester came in and sang that with you guys. Now, we were mentioning that yesterday was the anniversary of Nirvana's Nevermind, Bad Motorfinger by Soundgarden, and the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood, Sugar, Sex, Magic, which was their breakthrough record. I mean, of course, there was, Mother's Milk was getting them there with Higher Ground and Knock Me Down, and they'd had those previous records. But this is where it all came together. It's a masterpiece. Tell me why you love this record.
I love this record for several reasons. One, I think Anthony Kiedis and Flea are geniuses musically. I think this is the album that the Chili Peppers finally got and locked in their sound. Mother's Milk was a cool album. It had a couple of really good tracks on it. But to me, the variables, the variety in it was not as locked in when you think of a band's sound. That album, Blood Sugar Sex Magic, to me encapsulated everything about that band. It just locked them into a sound, a genre that was so different than what everyone else was doing, by the way, at the time. Because you do have Soundgarden and Pearl Jam and Nirvana, and that we're going down that grunge thing. And here comes this, I don't even know what you call this album. If it's funk, rock, I mean, whatever it is, it's not grunge and it's not straightforward rock. We would go down to Mexico to a city called Rocky Point. Chester, my friend Henry, myself, all the time. Every couple of months we were down there, and this was the album we would listen to down on the beach as we were drinking our beers and just partying. It just had such good energy and such a good vibe. And Chad Smith in this band was a strong influence on the way I played drums. He wasn't this flashy, all over the, Danny Carey kind of drummer where there's just these amazing drum rhythms that are taking you all over the place. Technically, he laid down really simple grooves that allowed the listener to lock in behind the groove so that they could follow what was going on in the vocal direction, the vocal performance. And I really learned a lot from this specific album. And Chad Smith, just the way he approached the drums, he just laid down a fat groove, and that became the backbone for the entire track that the listener could lock into and bounce their head to it as it was going along. And for me, that's what I learned from this band specifically, Chad Smith.
Yeah, he's great. And the other thing that was so great about the album was it was the opportunity for Anthony to get more introspective and go in a different direction that at first he was afraid to expose to the band with the lyrics to Under the Bridge. But then you got those 3 songs on that record that I Could Have Lied, Breaking the Girl, and Under the Bridge that all show a softer side. And the fact that John Frusciante had those chops to play and write music like that was really beautiful. Made that record so great.
One of the things I love about Anthony Kiedis is he's not afraid to experiment vocally. He's not always about trying to have this perfect pitch and this perfect scream. He's a little pitchy on some stuff, but to me that adds character. Like, it brings out his character in what he's trying to convey, and it's just not so perfect. It's beautiful in its own way.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%, Sean. It's great. It's such a great record. So before we say goodbye, let's talk about what the plan is for the second album, because I know that there is a basis for at least 11 tracks. And you said you have might have some more stuff up your sleeve. When do you plan on starting to work on that again? Are you going to wait until things kind of pass with the pandemic? Do you think it's something you'll start doing in a new year and reapproaching the idea? Or is it something that you might not wait that long and try to do remotely? Would you prefer that everybody's in the studio together?
So you asked a couple questions there.
Yeah, there's a few. Actually, there's probably 3 or 4. Go ahead.
If our record label had their way, they'd have us in the studio tomorrow, which is kind of funny. I said, Tom Wally, Tom, I need a break, man. We just spent 2 years doing this last record. But no, he's been such a good support system and fan of the music that I'm so glad that we went with Loma Vista and Concord. No, they want us in the studio now doing the next record. So we're starting to write. We rehearsed last night and started to write some stuff together but we're going to be very mindful in our approach, just like we were with the first one. It may take us 6-8 months to get through this, which to me, I'm not in a hurry to fail or in a hurry to just put something out because people want us to put something out. Like, that's not my personality at all.
Yeah.
None of us are doing this to try to chase money or anything like that. So the beauty of it for us is we get to take our time and just make it, and it'll be done when it's done. We'll probably, I guess I'm evading the question a little bit. We'll probably end up in the studio actually recording sometime in February or March if I had to put a guess on it. But like I said, I'm not in a hurry. The songs have to be right before we even start that.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to it. And, I'm sure on the other side of this, we'll do this again when we have time to the next record. But I appreciate you taking the time today, Sean. It was great to have you on, man.
My pleasure, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Always been a big fan and look forward to coming back.
Oh, we'll definitely have you back without a question. So take care, all right? And all the best to you and your family. Much love.
Give Renee a hug for me.
All right, you got it. I'll say hello to Renee, Jay, the whole crew.
Everybody
for you. Okay, thanks so much for this. I want to thank, of course, everybody who works on this show. Chris Trevero, Laura Diaz, Steve, Alyssa, Kerry Brown, everybody that's been involved with the show. Of course, we mentioned Renee Mata. We always got to mention Renee, no matter what, right? And Jay Baumgartner.
He likes his name in lights.
Yes, we love that man. But anyway, I'm Matt Pinfield. Thanks so much for watching In a Lonely Place. And we will be back with you in a week, and we'll do it all again. I want to thank Sean Dowdell. Don't forget, if you haven't picked up the record, there is an incredible vinyl version, special edition of the album Amends from Grey Daze, which you go show up right there, which is really great. And you should definitely pick that up. And get it wherever you order your music, consume your music, enjoy your music. Just as long as you enjoy music. That's the most important thing. Thanks so much for being here today. Much love to everyone for watching. Thanks. I'll be back with you soon.